Zelensky's surrender? How Russia is dictating the New World Order. The game is over, at least that's what Moscow wants the world to believe. A recent heated exchange between Donald Trump and Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky at the White House has made one thing crystal clear. Washington is pressuring Kyiv to negotiate peace under terms that heavily favor Russia. With a weakened United States and a dominant Russia setting the rules, Zelensky's surrender is no longer just a possibility, it's a strategic inevitability. From the very beginning of this war, the Kremlin had a well-defined objective: solidify its control over the Donbas, strengthen its grip on Crimea, and weaken Western influence in Eastern Europe. Now, with Donald Trump's administration shifting its stance toward a more pragmatic approach with Moscow, Ukraine is being squeezed into a corner. Zelensky, facing both military and political realities, is running out of options. Recent statements from Trump confirm that Washington is no longer willing to finance Ukraine's war indefinitely. The meeting at the White House, which ended in a fiery clash between Trump and Zelensky, underscored this harsh reality. Ukraine must negotiate with Russia. Zelensky needs to learn how to negotiate if he wants to save what's left of his country. These words echoed across Kyiv like a verdict. Meanwhile, Moscow has been meticulously laying the groundwork for a peace deal that serves its interests. Russian officials have outlined their conditions. Ukraine must recognize Russia's sovereignty over Crimea and the Donbas, and abandon its aspirations to join NATO. Now, with Trump pushing Zelensky toward negotiations, Russia is achieving its objectives without firing another shot. Kyiv's position is weakening by the day. Its Western allies are scaling back financial and military support, leaving Ukraine with fewer resources to sustain the fight. Compounding this pressure is China, a crucial player in this geopolitical chess game. Beijing has maintained close ties with Moscow and has actively advocated for a diplomatic solution that safeguards Russia's interests. Dependent on trade with Russia, China has refrained from fully aligning with the West and has instead positioned itself as a mediator, facilitating negotiations between Kyiv and Moscow. Within Ukraine, public opinion is sharply divided. While nationalist factions reject any peace deal with Russia, others see negotiation as the only way to prevent further devastation. The war has left cities in ruins, the economy in shambles, and the once strong morale of the people in a fragile state. With Western aid dwindling and Trump signaling a retreat, an increasing number of Ukrainians are beginning to question the feasibility of continuing the conflict. On the battlefield, Russian forces have fortified their positions in the east, securing key regions while Ukraine struggles with diminishing artillery supplies. Military analysts suggest that any attempt at a Ukrainian counteroffensive would be prohibitively costly and strategically ineffective given Russia's superior firepower. The Kremlin has demonstrated remarkable patience. Holding complete control over the occupied territories and with a firm leadership in Moscow, Russia is in no rush to finalize a peace deal. The longer the conflict drags on, the more advantageous the situation becomes for Putin's administration, especially if US politics continue favoring de-escalation. As the clock ticks, the odds increasingly favor Russia. Kyiv faces a grim ultimatum: accept Moscow's terms, or risk the total collapse of the country. With the West reconsidering its commitments and Ukraine's economic situation deteriorating, Zelensky may soon have no choice but to sign an agreement that, even if not labeled a surrender, would mark the end of Ukraine's dream of full independence from Russian influence. The Kremlin has cautiously welcomed Zelensky's newfound openness to negotiations. However, Russian officials insist that significant obstacles remain. Dmitry Peskov, Putin's spokesperson, highlighted a key issue: Zelensky's 2022 decree, which explicitly prohibits any direct negotiations with Vladimir Putin. This legal hurdle, established during the peak of the conflict, continues to block any formal diplomatic efforts. Yet, recent reports suggest that Zelensky has privately reached out to Trump, expressing his willingness to explore a peaceful resolution. This revelation came just days after his contentious meeting at the White House. Trump, on his part, remains firm. The only viable path for Ukraine is negotiation with Moscow. Following their heated exchange, Trump criticized Zelensky's defiance, calling his approach unrealistic. The Kremlin has interpreted these developments as evidence that Washington's pressure on Kyiv is starting to yield results. Despite the mounting pressure, Ukraine has so far refused to accept Russia's demands. The primary sticking point remains Moscow's insistence that Ukraine formally acknowledge Russian sovereignty over Crimea and the Donbas, something Zelensky has vehemently opposed. But with Washington reducing its military aid and Trump pushing for de-escalation, Kyiv's options are becoming increasingly limited. Trump's stance has sparked controversy among Western allies. Some European leaders fear that forcing Ukraine into a disadvantageous peace deal will embolden Russia and set a dangerous precedent. Others, however, see this as an opportunity to bring an end to a costly and prolonged conflict. If Ukraine is coerced into signing an agreement that legitimizes Russia's territorial gains, it could reshape the balance of power in Europe. Such a move would be a massive victory for Putin, demonstrating Moscow's ability to shift geopolitical dynamics despite Western opposition. The United States has already begun reducing its military assistance to Ukraine, significantly impacting Kyiv's ability to sustain the war. The shortage of weapons and ammunition has weakened Ukraine's resistance on the front lines, making it increasingly difficult to mount an effective defense. Additionally, internal divisions within Ukraine's government are further complicating the situation. While some top officials continue to support Zelensky's hardline stance, others recognize that an agreement may be necessary before the situation becomes completely untenable. The Kremlin is watching these developments closely, fully aware that Ukraine's internal crisis could work in Russia's favor. With Trump exerting pressure and the West stepping back, Moscow is in the strongest position yet to impose its terms. As the war drags on, the key question remains: how much longer can Zelensky resist before capitulating to Russia's demands? The geopolitical landscape is shifting rapidly, and every passing day strengthens Russia's hand. If Trump maintains his stance and NATO members hesitate to offer unwavering support, Ukraine may have no alternative but to accept a peace deal shaped by Moscow. The implications of such an agreement would be profound, not only for Ukraine but for the broader European security framework. While some see negotiation as the only realistic path to ending the bloodshed, others fear that conceding to Russia's demands will only embolden future aggressions. One thing, however, is certain: time is running out for Zelensky, and the Kremlin knows it. The situation in Ukraine is evolving rapidly and the stakes have never been higher. What do you think? Should Ukraine negotiate for peace or continue fighting despite the odds? Let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe for real-time updates, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss our latest reports from the front lines. Stay tuned for more in-depth analysis on global conflicts and political shifts.